A 63-year-old accountant in Minnesota retired last year. He'd been investing for 31 years. Conservative index funds, nothing fancy. His portfolio hit $2.1 million. Here's what's interesting. He stopped contributing at 52, 11 years of zero new money going in. His portfolio grew by $800,000 during those 11 years without him lifting a finger. His money was working harder than he ever did. A woman in Austin, Texas hit her number at 47. She was a software engineer, burned out, ready to walk away. Her financial advisor told her she needed to keep grinding until 65. She ran the math herself. Turns out her advisor was wrong. She could have stopped contributing at 43 and still hit her target. 4 years of unnecessary stress because nobody explained the crossover point to her. A couple in Portland, Oregon kept maxing out their retirement accounts for 15 years after they needed to. They were terrified of running out of money. When they finally sat down with someone who understood compounding, they realized they'd been working extra years for no reason. Their portfolio had reached critical mass a decade earlier. They were just shoving coal into a furnace that was already blazing hot. Here's the question that changes everything. When exactly does your portfolio become a self-sustaining wealth generator? When can you actually stop contributing and still hit your retirement goals? Because the answer isn't 65. It isn't some arbitrary age. It's a specific mathematical moment, and most people have no idea it exists. Today, I'm going to explain exactly how this crossover point works, why it happens way earlier than most people think, and how to calculate your own stopping point. We're going to cover the precise mechanics of when portfolio growth exceeds contributions, what happens if you stop at different stages, something called coast fire, which is basically front-loading your suffering so you can relax for decades, and the milestones that tell you you're on track. This is the exact moment you no longer need to invest for retirement, and it's probably closer than you think. Think of wealth building like pushing a massive stone wheel. You've seen those old grain mills, the giant circular stones that grind wheat into flour? That wheel is heavy. Early on, you're throwing your entire body weight against it. Every month, you're shoving money into the system, and the wheel barely inches forward. You're exhausted. You're wondering if this is even worth it. The wheel moves so slowly you can barely perceive progress. But here's the thing about wheels. Once they start spinning, they develop momentum. Angular momentum, if you want to get technical. The energy you put in doesn't disappear, it accumulates. The wheel spins faster, then faster still. Eventually, it's rotating so quickly that when you push it, your effort barely registers. The wheel has its own energy now. It doesn't need you anymore. That's compounding. That's the crossover point. And once you hit it, everything changes. You stop being the laborer. You become the observer. Let me show you exactly when this happens with real numbers. Say you're investing $20,000 per year. That's aggressive but achievable for many people. You're capturing a 7% annual return, which is roughly the historical average for the stock market after inflation. When you have $100,000 invested, that 7% growth gives you $7,000. Your $20,000 in contributions is still doing most of the heavy lifting. You're the engine. The wheel is barely moving on its own. But watch what happens as the portfolio grows. At $300,000 invested, that 7% return generates $21,000 in growth. Now your contributions and your growth are roughly equal. You're sharing the workload with compounding. The wheel has momentum. At $500,000 invested, 7% growth gives you $35,000. Your $20,000 in contributions suddenly looks small next to what the market handed you. Compounding is now the primary driver. You're the passenger. The wheel is spinning on its own. And at $1 million invested, 7% growth generates $70,000. Your $20,000 contribution is basically a rounding error. The portfolio has taken over completely. The wheel doesn't need you anymore. Now you might be thinking, but contributions always matter. Every dollar compounds over time. And technically, sure, more money is always more money. But that's not the point. What we're identifying is when the burden shifts, when you stop being the primary driver of your wealth and compounding becomes the star of the show. I remember talking to a guy who ran a small manufacturing business in Ohio. He made decent money, saved aggressively in his 40s, hit about $400,000 in his 401k by the time he was 52. Then something shifted in his head. He stopped caring about his monthly contributions, not because he gave up, but because he did the math. His portfolio grew by $40,000 one year while he was scraping together $20,000 in contributions. He looked at those numbers and thought, what am I even doing here? His money was officially working harder than he was. That's the psychological shift. You go from feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill to watching the boulder roll downhill on its own. The anxiety decreases. The urgency shifts. You realize you've hit escape velocity. But here's where most people get confused. They don't understand what happens if they stop contributing at different points along the way. So let me walk through the exact trade-offs. Stick with our example. You're investing $20,000 per year at 7% returns. If you keep contributing without stopping, you hit $1 million in about 23 years. That's the baseline, 23 years of consistent contributions and you're a millionaire. But what if you stopped at $100,000 invested? It takes you about 5 years to build up that 100,000 with your $20,000 annual contributions. If you stop there and let compounding do the rest, it would take another 35 years to reach $1 million. That's 40 years total. Stopping at 100,000 cost you 17 extra years compared to the baseline. Brutal. You're not even close to escape velocity. The wheel isn't spinning fast enough. Now let's say you push to $300,000 before stopping. That takes about 11 years of contributing. From there, compounding alone needs another 18 years to carry you to $1 million. That's 29 years total. Stopping at 300,000 only costs you 6 extra years compared to never stopping. 6 years might be worth it if you desperately need breathing room. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you grind until you hit $500,000 invested, that takes about 15 years of contributions. If you stop there, compounding doubles it to $1 million in just 11 more years. That's 26 years total. You're only 3 years behind the baseline of contributing the entire way through. Think about that. You could stop investing entirely at $500,000 and only delay your $1 million milestone by 3 years. That's the power of reaching critical mass. Once you're at that level, compounding is doing so much work that your contributions barely move the needle. The wheel is spinning so fast that your pushes are nearly irrelevant. This brings us to one of the most powerful frameworks in personal finance. It's called coast fire, and it's basically the art of front-loading your suffering so you can coast for decades afterward. Here's the concept. You save and invest aggressively early on until you hit a specific number where compounding alone will carry you to your retirement goal without you contributing another dollar. Once you hit that number, you stop. You're done. The portfolio's on autopilot. You can take a lower paying job you actually enjoy. You can work part-time. You can travel for a year. Whatever. The pressure is off because your retirement is already handled. Let me walk through the math. Say you want $2 million by the time you're 65. You're 30 years old right now. If you can capture 7% annual returns, how much do you need invested today to hit $2 million in 35 years without adding anything? The answer is $187,000. That's your coast fire number. If you hit $187,000 invested by age 30 and you never contribute another dime, compounding alone gets you to $2 million by 65. Now, is hitting $187,000 by 30 realistic for some people? Absolutely. If you graduate college at 22 with minimal debt, land a decent job, and live like you're still in college for 8 years while investing aggressively, you can hit it. I knew a software engineer who did exactly this. Lived with roommates until he was 31, drove a 10-year-old Honda, maxed out his 401k and Roth IRA, threw everything else into a taxable account. Hit $200,000 by 32, then he quit his high-stress job and became a freelance developer working 20 hours a week. His retirement was already handled. He'd reached the crossover point. The wheel was spinning. For others, hitting that number by 30 isn't realistic. Maybe you're starting from zero at 30. Maybe you have student loans. Maybe you live in an expensive city. But even if you can't hit the exact number, the framework is still useful because it forces you to think about the trade-off. What if you hit $187,000 by 35 instead? Well, now you have 30 years until 65. That same $187,000 grows to about $1.4 million. Not quite $2 million, but you're most of the way there. Or maybe you push until 40 and hit $300,000 invested. From there, compounding gets you to $2.3 million by 65. You overshot your goal and bought yourself even more flexibility. The psychological power of coast fire is massive. You're not just saving blindly, hoping it works out someday. You're targeting a specific milestone that fundamentally changes your relationship with work. Once you hit your coast fire number, you're not desperate for the paycheck anymore. You're not stuck in a job you hate because you need the income to fund your retirement accounts. You're choosing to work because it adds value to your life, not because you have to. I've watched this play out with multiple people. One guy hit his coast fire number at 38, then took a job teaching high school math, paid half what his corporate job did, but he loved it. His retirement was locked in. Another woman hit her number at 42, then started a nonprofit that barely paid her a salary. She could do that because she'd front-loaded the suffering. She'd hit critical mass. The wheel was spinning. This is where someone usually objects. But what about inflation? What about market crashes? What if returns are lower than 7%? These are fair questions. Let me address them. Inflation is already baked into the numbers if you use real returns. The historical average return of the S&P 500 is about 10% nominally, 7% after inflation. So when I say 7%, I'm already accounting for the fact that your money will be worth less in the future. Market crashes are a real concern. But here's the thing. If you're 30 years old and you hit your Coast-Fire number, you have 35 years until retirement. That's enough time to ride out multiple crashes. The market crashed in 2008. It recovered by 2012. 4 years. If you're investing for decades, crashes are blips. Now, if returns are lower than 7%, your Coast-Fire number goes up. At 6% returns, you'd need about $260,000 at age 30 to hit $2 million by 65. Still achievable, but the framework doesn't break. You just adjust the target. The wheel metaphor still works. The wheel might spin a little slower if returns are lower, but once it reaches critical speed, it still carries you. So let's talk about the milestones along the way, the moments that tell you compounding is working and you're not just throwing money into a void. First, $10,000 invested. This might not sound huge, but it's massive psychologically. When you're starting out, you're saving $50 a week or maybe 10% of your paycheck, and it feels like you're getting nowhere. Then one day you check your account and it says $10,000. That's real money. That's proof your efforts are paying off. You should absolutely celebrate that milestone because it's the first time you realize this whole investing thing might actually work. The wheel has started to move. First, $100,000. This is the milestone Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett obsess over. They call it the hardest $100,000 you'll ever make, but also the most important. And they're right. Once you hit six figures invested, compounding starts to feel real. Let's say you get to $100,000, and then we have a year like 2024 where the S&P 500 returns about 24%. Your portfolio just grew by $24,000. That's more than most people save in an entire year. That's when you start to understand what momentum actually means. The wheel is picking up speed. The crossover point. This is when portfolio growth exceeds contributions. This is when you look at your annual statement and realize the market added more to your account than you did. Your money is officially working harder than you are. That moment hits differently for everyone, depending on how much you save. But when it happens, you feel it. The burden shifts. When your portfolio generates more in a year than your job pays you, this one is wild. I remember explaining this concept to someone in their 20s who was making $40,000 a year. They said that never happens. That's not even realistic. But here's the thing. It absolutely happens if you stay in the game long enough. When you have $1 million invested and the market returns 10%, that's $100,000 in growth. If your salary is $80,000, your portfolio just out-earned you. That's not luck, that's mathematics. That's the wheel spinning faster than you can push it. When your portfolio covers your basic living expenses, this is a huge milestone for peace of mind. When your portfolio generates enough annually to cover housing, transportation, healthcare, the essentials, you're not covering luxuries yet, but you have security. If you lost your job tomorrow, your portfolio would keep you alive. That's your first real taste of financial freedom. When your portfolio covers your entire lifestyle, including luxuries. This is the traditional retirement vision. Your portfolio generates enough to cover everything. Housing, food, transportation, vacations, the life you actually want to live. For most people, this takes decades, but once you're here, you've made it. When you work because you want to, not because you have to. This is the ultimate milestone. Your portfolio sustains your lifestyle completely, but maybe you keep working anyway. Not for the paycheck. For meaning, for legacy, for something bigger than money. That's when you know you've won the game. Here's the thing about the crossover point. There's no single magic number where this happens for everyone. It depends entirely on your situation, your savings rate, and what the market does. If you save more each year, your contributions matter for longer. Let's say you're an aggressive saver putting away $40,000 annually instead of $20,000. Well, at that rate, it might take until your portfolio hits $600,000 to $800,000 before compounding becomes the primary driver. You're contributing so much that even a 7% return on $500,000, which is $35,000, still gets dwarfed by your $40,000 contributions. You're the engine for a longer stretch of the journey. The wheel needs more momentum before it can carry itself. But if you save less each year, compounding becomes meaningful sooner. Say you're putting away $10,000 annually. Once your portfolio hits $150,000 to $250,000, that 7% return starts outpacing what you're adding. Your contributions matter, but compounding takes over faster because the bar is lower. the wheel reaches critical speed sooner. Then there's the return variable. If the market grows faster or slower, the tipping point shifts. If you're capturing 8% returns instead of 7, compounding accelerates. Your portfolio grows faster, which means it reaches that critical mass where growth exceeds contribution sooner. But if you're only capturing 5% returns, maybe because you're more conservative or the market's been rough, the crossover point gets delayed. It takes longer for your portfolio to grow enough to outpace your contributions. This is why you can't just copy someone else's plan and expect the same results. Your crossover point is unique to you. It's shaped by how much you earn, how much you save, how you invest, and what the market does over the years you're invested. I spent over 10 years running my own business, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who taught me how money actually moves. And one thing I learned is that most financial mistakes aren't math problems, they're brain problems. People don't understand how their own decision making works. They think in linear terms when wealth builds exponentially. They panic when the market drops, selling at the bottom, destroying years of compounding. They chase returns, buying high and selling low, sabotaging the wheel before it can spin. Here's a quick comedic cutaway. Picture your financial advisor telling you to stay the course while his boat is literally named the management fee. Not saying all advisors are bad, just saying check who's actually benefiting from the relationship. And another thing, the same people who say you can't time the market will absolutely try to time your retirement. Oh, you need to work until 65. Why? Because that's when you can access retirement accounts penalty free. That's not a financial reason, that's a tax rule. There's a difference. Let me give you a concrete example, a real scenario with actual numbers, so this isn't just theory. Meet Tom. He's 45 years old, makes $120,000 a year, and he's been contributing $25,000 annually to his retirement accounts for the past 12 years. His portfolio is sitting at $450,000. He's exhausted. He's thinking about slowing down, maybe taking a less stressful job that pays $90,000 but gives him his life back. The question is, can he afford to stop investing and coast? Or does he need to keep grinding? Let's run the numbers. If Tom keeps contributing $25,000 per year at 7% returns, he'll hit $1.5 million by the time he's 60. That's 15 years of continued grinding. But what if he stops contributing today at $450,000? At 7%, that $450,000 grows to $1.25 million by the time he's 60. He's giving up $250,000 in exchange for 15 years of breathing room and a lower stress life. Is that worth it for Tom? Maybe. Depends on his goals, his health, his family situation, but here's what's important. At $450,000, Tom has already passed his crossover point. His portfolio is generating about $31,500 per year in growth at 7%. That's already more than he was contributing annually. The wheel is spinning. He's not the primary driver anymore. If Tom takes that $90,000 job and just stops investing altogether, he'll still retire with over $1 million. Not as much as if he kept grinding, but enough. And he bought himself 15 years of lower stress, more time with his family, and the psychological relief of knowing his retirement is handled. That's the trade-off. That's the crossover point in action. It's not about maxing out every possible dollar. It's about understanding when you have enough momentum that you can choose to ease off without destroying your future. What 99% of people do is usually what not to do. They keep grinding out of fear, not strategy. They don't understand the math, so they assume they have to maximize contributions until 65. But the math tells a different story. So here's what you actually do with this information. 3 practical takeaways. First, calculate your personal crossover point. Take your current portfolio value, multiply it by your expected annual return, and compare it to your annual contributions. Are you close? Have you already passed it? If you're not there yet, what number do you need to hit before compounding takes over? That's your target. That's what you're working toward. Second, decide if Coast Fire makes sense for you. If you're in your 30s or early 40s and you can front load your contributions aggressively for 5 to 10 years, you might be able to hit your Coast Fire number and fundamentally change your relationship with work. Run the math. Figure out what number you need at your current age to coast to your retirement goal. If it's realistic, consider grinding hard now so you can coast later. Third, celebrate the milestones along the way. Investing is a multi-decade journey. If you only focus on the finish line, you'll burn out. But if you mark the wins, the first $10,000, the first $100,000, the crossover point, you stay motivated. You stay in the game. And staying in the game is 90% of winning. The exact moment you no longer need to invest for retirement isn't 65. It's not some arbitrary age. It's the moment your portfolio grows faster than you can save. For most people contributing $20,000 to $30,000 per year, that happens somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000 invested. Once you hit that zone, you're coasting. Whether you realize it or not, the wheel is spinning, compounding is taken over, you're just along for the ride. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. The sooner you realize the crossover point exists, the sooner you can stop grinding out of fear and start making choices based on what you actually want your life to look like. Because at the end of the day, money is a tool, and the whole point of a tool is that eventually it does the work for you.